The story of 3IATLAS will change how you see the universe, not because of what we think it is, but because of what the physics proves it did. 3 days ago, scientists uncovered shocking evidence about this interstellar object that makes the Oumuamua event look like a dress rehearsal. And you'll be among the first to see the data they tried to scrub. Today, we are breaking the silence. We're counting down the 10 anomalous facts about this object, and number 5 is the smoking gun that triggered a global media blackout. Let's begin with the physics violation that started it all. Because while NASA called it a glitch, the independent telemetry tells a terrifyingly different story. It didn't reflect the solar flare, it fed on it. To understand why the observatories went dark, we have to look closely at the raw data from October 21st, 2025. It began as a routine day for the Solar Dynamics Observatory, SDO, and the network of deep space tracking stations scattered across the globe. 3IATLAS, the third confirmed interstellar object in human history, was inbound. It had been tracked for months, a silent traveler from the deep void, projected to make a close perihelion pass around our sun before slinging itself back out into the darkness. Up until 14 UTC, it was behaving exactly as our gravitational models predicted, a dead rock, tumbling through the vacuum, obeying the laws of Kepler and Newton. But the sun had other plans. At exactly 14 UTC, the sun released an X-class solar flare, a massive coronal mass ejection, CME. This was not a subtle event. It was a violent expulsion of billions of tons of superheated plasma and highly charged electromagnetic particles, hurled into interplanetary space at millions of miles per hour. In the grand scale of the solar system, these events are common. They are the breathing of a star. Usually, when a CME erupts, astronomers worry about satellite communications on Earth or the safety of astronauts on the ISS. But this time, the trajectory of the flare aligned perfectly with the path of 3IATLAS. It was a direct hit. Under every known model of astrophysics, the interaction between a solar flare and a natural object is predictable. It is a matter of simple thermodynamics. When a wave of high-energy particles strikes a comet or an asteroid, the object reacts violently. The sheer thermal impact heats the surface of the rock instantly. Ice sublimates into gas, dust is kicked up into a coma, and the object glows. It reflects light. It scatters radiation. On a spectral graph, this looks like a massive spike in intensity. The object should have lit up like a flare in the night sky, visible to infrared sensors across the entire system. We should have seen a scattering event, where the solar energy bounces off the object's surface in all directions. But 3IATLAS didn't light up. This is the moment the narrative broke. This is the moment where the official story diverges from the reality recorded by the sensors. According to cross-verified telemetry from 3 independent ground stations in Chile, Australia, and the Canary Islands, the moment the CME wavefront struck 3IATLAS, the spectral readings did not spike. They flattened. In the control rooms, this would have looked like a system failure. Imagine watching a heart monitor where the pulse suddenly flatlines, but the patient is still sitting up and talking. That is what happened to the data. The energy from the solar flare hit the object, and instead of bouncing off, it vanished. The graph dropped to near zero. In the field of spectroscopy, we call this spectral flattening or perfect absorption. For a natural object, this is physically impossible. Rock, ice, iron, nickel, carbon, every material we know of in the natural universe has an albedo. They all reflect some portion of the light and energy that hits them. Even the darkest charcoal reflects some light. For the readings to drop this low, for the energy to simply disappear upon contact, the object would have to be absorbing the incident radiation with near 100% efficiency. It would have to be darker than vantablack, darker than any natural material ever discovered. Think about what that implies for a moment. If you throw a bucket of water at a brick wall, the water splashes back. It scatters. That is reflection. But if you throw a bucket of water into a black hole, it disappears. It is consumed. 3IATLAS acted like a black hole for solar energy. It didn't interact with the flare like a rock, it interacted with it like a battery. NASA's automated systems at the SDO flagged this immediately. The algorithms are designed to filter out noise, and a reading like this total absorption of an X-class Flares so far outside the parameters of asteroid or comet that the computers defaulted to the only logical conclusion. Error, they flagged it as an instrumentation glitch. The official line released at 16:30 UTC was sensor calibration drift due to solar intensity. It's a convenient explanation. It's boring, it's technical, and it's designed to make you stop asking questions. It might have even worked if the story ended there. If 3IATLAS had just continued on its drift, silent and dark, we might have accepted the glitch theory. We might have believed that the sensors were simply blinded by the sun's rage. But 12 hours later, the object moved. And I don't mean it drifted. I don't mean it tumbled. I mean it accelerated. This is where the glitch theory dies. Sensors can have glitches. Data streams can be corrupted. But gravity does not glitch. The laws of motion are absolute. If 3IATLAS were a dead rock, its path would be dictated entirely by the sun's gravity. It would follow a smooth, predictable hyperbola. But the tracking data from the European Space Agency and the Amateur Astronomer Network showed something that made the blood run cold in observatories around the world. Immediately following the absorption event, immediately after it drank, the solar flare, 3IATLAS changed its velocity. We call this delta V in orbital mechanics. Delta V is the currency of space travel. To change your orbit, to speed up or slow down, you need to spend energy. You need an engine. The object's velocity increased by exactly 3 kilometers per second against the gravitational pull of the sun. To put that in perspective, the Voyager probes, the fastest machines humanity has ever built, took years of gravity assists to reach their speeds. 3IATLAS gained 3 kilometers per second of speed in a matter of minutes. This brings us back to the comparison with Oumuamua. In 2017, Oumuamua also showed a non-gravitational acceleration. It was a tiny, subtle push that puzzled scientists for years. The leading theory was that Oumuamua was a hydrogen iceberg. That invisible hydrogen gas was venting off the surface, acting like a weak, natural thruster. It was a stretch, but the math just barely worked. It was the only way to keep the natural object worldview intact. But for 3IATLAS, the hydrogen iceberg theory is dead on arrival. For a natural object to accelerate by 3 km/s via outgassing, it would have to be shedding mass at a catastrophic rate. It would need to be venting tons of material every second. It would look like a rocket launch. Our telescopes would see a massive cloud of gas and debris surrounding the object. It would be the brightest thing in the sky. But 3IATLAS is clean. There is no tail. There is no coma. There is no debris field. The space around it is pristine vacuum. There is no outgassing to explain the push. So, we are left with a terrifying equation. We have an object that absorbed a massive amount of energy from a solar flare, the spectral flattening. And moments later, that same object exhibited a massive spike in kinetic energy, the acceleration. Thermodynamics has a law. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. The solar energy from the flare didn't vanish. It was converted. The glitch in the spectral reading was the refueling process. The spike in velocity was the engine turning on. This is the conclusion that the scientific community reached on the night of October 21st. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was the result of basic math. You could see the realization spreading in real time on forums, in private Discord servers, and on the preprint server RZiv. Papers began to appear with titles like Anomalous Propulsion in Interstellar, Object 3I, and High-Efficiency Photovoltaic Absorption Events. Scientists were doing their jobs. They were looking at the data and drawing the only conclusion the physics allowed. This object is not natural. And then the purge began. It didn't happen all at once. It started with the dashboards. The live feeds from the SDO, which usually update every few minutes, froze. The timestamps stopped ticking. Then, the scheduled maintenance screens appeared. This was the first red flag. Maintenance on these systems is planned months in advance, not triggered during a major solar event. Then, the papers started disappearing. Academic papers that had been uploaded to RZiv, papers that had already been downloaded and shared, were withdrawn. The links went dead. The authors went silent. University servers that hosted the raw telemetry data suddenly became inaccessible. It was a digital burning of the Library of Alexandria. happening in silence, in the dark. They tried to erase the evidence of the acceleration. They tried to revert the narrative to the glitch. They want you to think it's just another rock, another Oumuamua, a piece of space junk tumbling through the void. They want you to believe that the sensors were wrong, that the math was wrong, that your eyes were lying to you. But we have the data they couldn't delete in time. We have the screenshots of the spectral flattening. We have the trajectory plots that show the acceleration. And when you put it all together, the picture is undeniable. 3IATLAS is not a rock. It is a machine. It entered our system, it waited for a fuel source, and when the sun provided it, it took it. And now, powered by our own star, it is moving faster than anything we have ever seen. And the scariest part isn't the speed. It's the direction. Because Oumuamua was drifting aimlessly, 3IATLAS is moving with purpose. Section 2. The comparison Atlas versus Oumuamua. To understand the magnitude of the threat we are facing, we have to look back at the only other time humanity has stared into the face of an interstellar visitor and blinked. The year was 2017, and the object was Oumuamua. It was the first confirmed visitor from outside our solar system, a reddish, cigar-shaped anomaly that tumbled erratically through the void. It became the most debated object in astrophysical history because it refused to behave like a comet or an asteroid. It didn't fit the models. It was too elongated, too shiny, and it moved with a strange, non-gravitational acceleration that defied easy explanation. But for all its weirdness, Oumuamua offered us a safety blanket. It was chaotic, it was tumbling, it was silent. The scientific consensus, desperate to avoid the A word, aliens, eventually settled on the hydrogen iceberg theory. They argued that Oumuamua was a chunk of frozen hydrogen, invisible to our sensors, venting gas that gave it a tiny, almost imperceptible push. It was a comforting lie. It allowed us to sleep at night, believing that the universe was still just full of dead rocks and ice. But 3IATLAS has shattered that comfort. If Oumuamua was the question, 3IATLAS is the terrifying answer. Where Oumuamua was a confusing riddle, 3IATLAS is a clear, unambiguous statement of intent. The differences between these two objects are not just in degree, they are in kind. And the first difference is the shape. Oumuamua was widely publicized as a cigar, a long, thin cylinder tumbling end over end. But the independent radar cross-section analysis of 3IATLAS reveals a completely different geometry. It is not a cigar. It is a disk. It is a flat, oblate spheroid, a pancake. In the world of natural astrophysics, flat objects are rare. Gravity tends to pull things into spheres, but in the world of artificial engineering, flatness serves a purpose. A flat surface maximizes area while minimizing mass. It is the perfect shape for a solar sail. It is the perfect shape for a collector. And unlike Oumuamua, 3IATLAS is not tumbling. This is a crucial detail that the deleted papers highlighted before they were scrubbed. Oumuamua's light curve was chaotic, dimming and brightening wildly as it flipped through space like a discarded bottle. 3IATLAS is stable. Its light curve is consistent. It is locked. It is maintaining a specific orientation relative to the sun, keeping its broad face pointed directly at the star. This is not the behavior of a tumbling rock. This is the behavior of a stabilized platform. It suggests active attitude control, gyroscopes, thrusters, or something far more advanced keeping it steady against the solar wind. But the most terrifying difference, the one that keeps astrophysicists awake at night, is the movement. We need to talk about propulsion. When Oumuamua passed the sun, it exhibited a non-gravitational acceleration. This is a fancy way of saying it moved differently than gravity alone would dictate. But the effect was tiny. It was a subtle deviation, a drift of a few thousand kilometers over millions of miles. It was like a leaf being blown by a gentle breeze. Scientists spent years arguing over whether it was real or just a measurement error. 3IATLAS didn't get a breeze, it got a kick. When that solar flare hit on October 21st, the object didn't just drift off course. It executed a high-energy maneuver. The change in velocity we recorded, that 3 kilometers per second spike, is orders of magnitude larger than anything Oumuamua displayed. To put this in perspective, if Oumuamua was a car rolling down a hill in neutral, 3IATLAS is a dragster slamming on the accelerator. You cannot explain a 3 km/s instantaneous velocity change without gassing. You cannot explain it with melting ice. This is where the skeptics try to bring back the hydrogen iceberg theory. They want to apply the 2017 logic to the 2025 event. They will tell you that maybe 3IATLAS is just a really volatile comet that exploded when the flare hit it. But physics is a stubborn thing. If a natural object exploded with enough force to accelerate it by 3 km/s, it would not remain intact. The structural stress of such an acceleration would shatter a pile of rock and ice. It would turn it into a cloud of gravel. Yet 3IATLAS is still one solid piece. We have the radar pings to prove it. It took the hit, it took the g-force, and it held together. This implies internal structure. It implies tensile strength far beyond what a loose agglomeration of ice can provide. It implies a hull. And remember the glitch we talked about, the spectral flattening? That is the final nail in the coffin of the natural theory. Oumuamua never absorbed energy like this. It reflected sunlight just like any other rock. 3IATLAS's absorption event, combined with its acceleration, paints a picture that no natural model can replicate. A rock does not eat a solar flare and then use the energy to sprint. That is a conversion process. That is technology. The scientific community knows this. The reason the hydrogen iceberg theory was accepted for Oumuamua was because the data was messy enough to allow for doubt. The data for 3IATLAS is clean. It is too clean. That is why they had to hide it. That is why the dashboards froze, because you can argue about a tumbling rock. You cannot argue about a stabilized disk that refuels off a star. This forces us to reevaluate the entire timeline. We have spent 8 years assuming that Oumuamua was a fluke, a one-off visitor from a random system. But what if it wasn't random? What if Oumuamua was exactly what Avi Loeb and others suggested it might be? A probe, a buoy, a scout sent to map the system, to check the stellar activity, to test the waters. If Oumuamua was the scout, the passive listener sent to report back, then 3IATLAS is the response. It is the active element. It is the heavy machinery. Think about the timing. 8 years. In interstellar terms, that is a heartbeat. It is effectively a convoy. The scout comes through, confirms that the star is stable and the system is open. And then the harvester arrives. Oumuamua was small, tumbling, and passive. It drifted by and did nothing. 3IATLAS is large, stable, and active. It maneuvered, it fed. And now it is moving with a purpose that Oumuamua never had. The trajectory analysis confirms this fear. Oumuamua was on a hyperbolic trajectory that ejected it from the solar system almost as soon as it arrived. It was passing through. 3IATLAS is also on an escape trajectory, but the new vector, the one created after the solar flare kick, has changed its destination. It is not just heading out into the empty void. It is correcting its course. It is aiming for something. We are still calculating the final vector, but the preliminary data suggests it is aligning itself with the ecliptic plane, the flat disk where all the planets orbit. Oumuamua came from above and left below, avoiding us. 3IATLAS is merging with our traffic. This is the realization that turns skepticism into dread. We are not looking at two random rocks that happen to drift by. We are looking at a sequence of events. We are seeing a pattern emerge from the darkness. The first visitor was a ghost. The second is a machine, and if there is a second, there is a third. We are no longer asking, are we alone? The universe has answered that question. The new question, the one that the deleted papers were trying to ask before they were silenced, is much simpler and much more terrifying. What are they building, and why do they need our sun to power it? Oumuamua was the knock on the door. 3IATLAS is the breach. And we are just sitting here, arguing about glitches, while the heavy machinery moves into position. Section 3, the cover-up and the silence. If the physics of 3IATLAS was the smoking gun, the reaction from the world's space agencies was the bullet. To understand the cover-up, you have to look at the timeline of silence. It didn't happen all at once. It was a cascading failure of transparency that began exactly 14 minutes after the solar flare made contact. The first domino to fall was the public access to the Solar Dynamics Observatory, SDO. For over a decade, the SDO has been the gold standard of solar observation, streaming near-live footage of the sun to the public. It is an automated system. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't blink. But at 14 UTC on October 21st, just as the spectral data from 3IATLAS began to flatten, the feed cut. It wasn't a subtle fade to black. It was a hard cut. Thousands of amateur astronomers and independent researchers who monitor these feeds for solar weather alerts were staring at a frozen image. The timestamp stuck. Moments later, the screen was replaced by a generic, scheduled maintenance placeholder. This was the first lie. Maintenance on the SDO is announced weeks in advance. It is planned around solar minimums, not during an X-class flare event. To take the primary eye off the sun during a major ejection is unheard of. It is like shutting down the radar at an airport during a blizzard. It was a panic move. Someone in a control room somewhere saw the absorption event, saw the impossibility of the data, and pulled the plug before the algorithm could upload the footage to the public archive. But the SDO was just the beginning. The real purge happened in the academic shadows. In the hours following the event, the scientific community was buzzing. The glitch narrative hadn't solidified yet, and researchers were doing what they always do: sharing data. Preprint papers began to flood servers like RZIV and university repositories. These were rough drafts, quick calculations done by astrophysicists at Caltech, MIT, and Cambridge, trying to make sense of the anomalous delta V. They had titles like Energy Conversion Efficiency in 3IATLAS and Non-Thermal Radiation Absorption. They were trying to solve the puzzle in real time. Then, the digital burning of Alexandria began. I want you to understand the scale of this. We are not talking about a few tweets being deleted. We are talking about the systematic removal of academic literature from the public record. At 18 UTC, a paper authored by a team at the University of Chile, one that detailed the spectral flattening with precise graphs, vanished from the server. The link returned a 404 error. When independent journalists tried to contact the lead author, her university email bounced. Her profile page on the faculty website was under construction. By midnight, the purge was global. The preprint server RZIV, which hosts physics papers before they are peer-reviewed, went offline for 2 hours for emergency server updates. When it came back online, the papers referencing 3IATLAS were gone. Not retracted. Gone. The DOIs, the digital object identifiers that serve as permanent receipts for these documents, were scrubbed. It was as if they never existed. This is not how science works. Retractions happen, yes, but they leave a trail. They leave a note saying, this paper was retracted due to error. These papers were vaporized. We managed to save 3 of them. Before the purge completed, an automated scraper script archived the PDFs. We have the raw data that the official press release contradicts. And when you look at these saved documents, you realize why they had to be deleted. The official narrative, the one NASA and the ESA are pushing, is that 3IATLAS is a tumbling rock that suffered a thermal outgassing event due to the flare. They claim the sensors were blinded by the sun, creating a ghost signal of acceleration. But the leaked telemetry in these papers tells a different story. The data from the Atacama Large Millimeter Array, ALMA, clearly shows that the ghost signal had a Doppler shift. A ghost signal, a glitch in the machine, does not have a Doppler shift. Real objects moving through space do. The frequency of the light coming from 3IATLAS shifted towards the blue end of the spectrum, proving that it was physically moving towards the sensor at high speed. The glitch had mass. The glitch had momentum. You cannot fake Doppler shift across 3 different observatories on 2 different continents simultaneously. This brings us to the most chilling realization of all. Why hide it? If it's aliens, why not tell us? We've been conditioned by movies to think that the government hides aliens because they want to exploit the technology, or because they made a secret deal. We think they are hiding the truth because they are malicious. But looking at the clumsy, panicked nature of this cover-up, the frozen screens, the sloppy deletions, the contradictory press statements, I don't think they are malicious. I think they are terrified. The government isn't hiding 3IATLAS because they are in control. They are hiding it because they are helpless. Think about it. If they admitted that an interstellar object just used our sun as a gas station, they would have to answer the next question. What are you going to do about it? And the answer is, nothing. We have no ships that can catch it. We have no weapons that can reach it. We have no way to communicate with it. If they admit the truth, they admit that the most powerful nations on Earth are effectively ants watching a tank roll over their hill. They are not hiding the aliens to protect their power. They are hiding the aliens to protect the illusion of their power. The silence isn't a strategy. It's a scream. They want to keep the market stable. They want to keep the populace calm. They want you to go to work tomorrow and pay your taxes and believe that the Space Force has everything under control. But the Space Force is staring at blank screens just like we are. The leaked internal memos we've seen, marked confidential NOFORN, are not filled with plans for contact. They are filled with confusion. They are asking the same questions we are. They are scrambling to get satellites into position, desperate to get a visual lock on an object that is defying their predictions. And that brings us to the final piece of evidence, the one that they are most desperate to suppress: the trajectory. When the SDO feed cut and the papers were scrubbed, the one thing they couldn't scrub was the sky itself. Amateur astronomers and independent observatories have continued to track 3IATLAS, even as the official feeds report lost signal. We have plotted the new course. We have run the numbers on the delta V from the solar flare. The official story is that 3IATLAS is heading out of the system, back into the dark, never to be seen again. They want you to believe it was a flyby, but the leaked trajectory shows something else. The acceleration didn't just speed it up, it bent the arc. 3IATLAS is not leaving. The new vector, the one created by that massive injection of solar energy, has placed it into a high-eccentricity capture orbit. It is slowing down relative to the Sun. It is turning. The projection shows it looping back. It is not heading for deep space. It is heading for the Lagrange point 2, L2, a stable gravitational pocket 1,000,000 miles behind the Earth. This is the same parking spot we use for the James Webb Space Telescope because it offers a perfect, unblocked view of the deep universe. But 3IATLAS isn't going there to look at the universe. L2 also offers a perfect, unblocked view of Earth. The heavy machinery didn't just refuel. It is parking. It is establishing a geostationary hold in our backyard. The cover-up isn't just about what happened on October 21st. It's about what is going to happen next week when it arrives at L2. They are trying to buy time before the world looks up and realizes that we have a new moon and it's watching us. Conclusion: the data doesn't lie, even when the people controlling it do. When you strip away the official denials, the frozen dashboards, and the deleted papers, you are left with a single, undeniable reality. 3IATLAS is technological. It is not a comet. It is not an asteroid. It is a machine that entered our solar system, identified a high-energy fuel source, and executed a maneuver to capture it. The spectral flattening proved the absorption, the acceleration proved the engine, and the trajectory proved the intent. We are no longer dealing with probabilities. We are dealing with presence. The implications of this are far more terrifying than any invasion movie. If 3IATLAS wanted to destroy us, it could have done so already. An object capable of absorbing a solar flare has mastery over energy scales we can barely comprehend. It didn't attack us, it ignored us. It treated our sun like a gas station on a lonely highway, and it treated Earth like a roadside anthill. It didn't care if we saw it. It didn't care if we panicked. It simply took what it needed and moved into position. This is the chilling truth that the cover-up was trying to protect us from. It wasn't about hiding a threat. It was about hiding our own insignificance. For thousands of years, we have looked up at the stars and wondered if we were special. We wondered if anyone was out there listening. 3IATLAS is the answer, and the answer is that we are not special. We are not the protagonists of this galaxy. We are simply living near a useful resource. The universe is not a silent void waiting for us to explore it. It is a busy, industrial highway, and we are just now noticing the traffic. So, when the official channels finally admit 3IATLAS is anomalous, remember what you saw here today. Remember the spectral flattening. Remember the delta V, and when you look up at the night sky, don't look for a savior or a conqueror. Look for the heavy machinery parking in the dark. We are not alone. We never were. But for the first time in history, we know exactly where we stand in the cosmic pecking order. We are the ants on the pavement,